Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes, and we are back, separated from what used to be the Talk series with a roster update, and you have no idea how long it took me to figure out that we hadn't used white in one of those things yet. Well, that was a far more positive reception than I was anticipating, so thank you everyone. It looks like we will be continuing in this newer format with these kinds of updates, at least for the future, and we'll continue to refine and figure these things out. The way I always thought about these and why I put them at the end of the talk videos instead of separating them out was that this was like talking about my fantasy team, which is something that I enjoy and might appeal to a niche audience, but I figured most people wouldn't be all that interested, but I was definitely wrong. There was definitely enough interest to continue. These won't come out every week, about every 2-ish weeks. I prefer to let shards, gear, progress in general build up enough so that when we do one of these videos, we got a lot of meat to get into and dissect. Let's start with some context. I showed this spreadsheet last time. It's nothing special. We don't need to get into the details of it. You can use hot utils or whatever else to track your gear. I like to do this because I'm cross-referencing multiple project scenarios and creating a heat map so I can very quickly keep track of what are my biggest priorities by color. So the project I broke down last time is GL Leia, and she is located within this column here, not in this first section. This first column is my inventory. The second two column is a different project, and there is a subtotal here which gets added to the total here, so we can get a subtotal between Leia and the projects that I'm currently prioritizing. And there's also a different scenario with Lord Vader if I went for Lord Vader instead of Leia, and what that subtotal would be combined with the first column. Those specifics don't matter, but what really matters is I am prioritizing different projects in this first column here. This is what used to contain the Leviathan and Jedi Knight Cal Kestis. That's what was shown in the last video. And with this project, we see some pretty big numbers. We've got 900 Cairo prods. This project here is a bigger Cairo investment alone than what I need for GL Leia. And here's what that project is. These 4 characters: Sith Eternal Emperor, Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, Terran Malicos, and Third Sister. Because once I was able to get past the fog of getting the Leviathan, I stepped into the realization that before I qualify and unlock GL Leia, we will be getting or needing to functionally relic, in the case of Sith Eternal Emperor, these 4 characters. So I looked into it and I didn't really like what I discovered. You can see part of it here on screen because individually it's easy to look at any single one of these characters and see that they're expensive, sure, but it's another thing entirely to add them all up and see the mountain that they are to climb. And it's a mountain we will be required to climb before we get Leia. So I can't fully calculate what it is to get and unlock Leia without calculating what it is to get and unlock these characters, because I will almost assuredly have all of them before Leia. And that means we are looking at 900 Cairo shock prods, almost 1,000 of the Carbantes, another 800 of the Cairotech battle computers, a bunch of stun guns, stun cuffs, and the numbers move down from there. In terms of the timeliness of those projects, you can see that they are very close. Third Sister here, at the rate my guild is going, I'm expecting to get Third Sister sometime in October, probably early to mid-October. I think I'll just need 1 territory battle in October. Malicos we're going to have in the next 2-3-ish weeks when Conquest is completed. I do Red Crate every single time. Cal Kestis, we are Cal Kestis ready, and we will be unlocking him next time he shows up. Hopefully it's in the next couple months, and not waiting several months until maybe December even, until CG releases the event again, but we're ready. I'd like to use him before the Datacron expires. Fortunately, we can knock one of those 4 off today, Sith Eternal Emperor. Now, I couldn't afford to add relics to him the last time we did one of these videos because I needed all of that signal data for the Leviathan. That was a time-sensitive event, but I can now, especially after double drop. And I'm not going to take him to high relics right now. That's something I don't really feel like I can afford. I want to retain some of the signal data for other projects. It's not that much. Like between getting Malicos in a couple weeks and this, we'll go through it quickly. But I do want to make him better, more of a threat, and make make my life a little bit easier as I use him. I've been using him as a Melgus counter so far, and Relic 1 was sufficient. I just needed the ultimate. But this gives me a little bit more wiggle room and might allow me to try using him with weaker Sith support characters. And we'll be stopping at Relic 5. Relic 5, good enough of a staging ground for now. And it's what I've prepared for. Great. So those characters are going to be the major variable we will need to manage as we prepare for Leia Organa. This is where the characters were at the end of the last video. Lobot, Akbar, Chirpa, Wicket, we will want to take these characters up to relics, but we want to make sure that going after these characters early, it doesn't really benefit us in any major way. Really only Akbar is going to help us with fleet, but that's now a lower tier fleet that we don't really utilize. So there's no immediate incentive to strengthen these teams, and what we really want to do is make sure that those kinds of characters don't delay our ability to take advantage of characters as powerful as Malicos and Third Sister. What we are going to do for Leia today is, and pretend like we didn't forget to do this earlier in the video and we're just splicing it in here, is we need to star up Captain Rex and Princess Nisa during the special drop event and the double drop event. We did make a good amount of progress here for Captain Rex, taking him up to 5 stars or 6 stars, 5 stars, getting close to 6 stars here. We are not going to put on this the Chirotech here. I've already spent a bunch of those. Princess Nisa up to 4 stars. I tried to get her to 5 stars. I think we're short. Yeah, we're just a tiny bit short on Princess Nisa. I didn't push things too hard. We were working on replenishing crystals, and I thought there would be a good chance that Princess Nisa might be added to a node prior to double drops, and I was a little concerned she'd like end up on a Cantina and I would have regretted farming her on those light side or dark side nodes, whichever one it was, just because that could have been a way for CG to have like forced a lot of people to unnecessarily spend crystals on a farm. Fortunately that didn't happen, so we don't have to think about or question that, but that's what I was processing in my head as I was making those decisions about how and where to spend my crystals. The next aspect we're touching on in terms of my roster development is how Grand Arena and Datacrons impacts all of the larger moves, all the other contextual moves here. This is the overall Datacron status. This is something I take seriously. Simming has removed a major pain point, so it's now easier than ever to have decent crons, but especially as a free-to-play player, this is one of those places you can make up a lot of ground up against your pay-to-play opponents or just any opponent with a stronger roster. For today, you can see I have 2 level 9 crons here on the Steadfast Resolve set. I've got Qui-Gon Jinn and Aayla Secura, and I want to make sure that I can use these. So we're going to add a little bit to some of the squads here to make sure that we can take advantage. Cam was always a character I wanted to add to Relics. Even at Gear 11, he's worth using. You can see here some of my Grand Arena history with my Qui-Gon Jinn squad. This is a fairly routine result where my opponents will bring in a Bad Batch squad with a Datacron and my Qui-Gon Jinn squad will get a hold, and I credit Cam to be a large part of that. It's also a testament to that at Gear 11 he is very much worth using. He's helped me out a ton, but it's time to take him higher because this Datacron set is something that I would like to utilize with him on the squad and not just an alternate Jedi. But even though this relic does technically detract from Malicos, Third Sister, Jedi Knight, Cal Kestis, it's a small enough move, a localized enough of a move, that it will boost me in 3v3 for next week, help me out more in 5v5 so I can apply Datacrons to this squad. And not just this current set, but really any Datacron set. That's something that I've been using my Qui-Gon Jinn squad without crons for a while because of having a Gear 11 Cam on that, in that squad, on that spot. And it is technically a little pricey because it is going to cost me some of my Kairos that I have been saving up, but I've saved up a good amount where I feel fairly comfortable, and we still have plenty of time. Like Third Sister is 2 months away or a month and a half away at this point, so using up one set here is not too much of a distraction. We will have Captain Drogon coming up as well, so he is probably gonna, I'm mentally budgeting in my head a minimum of 150 to take Captain Drogon up to gear 11. And really, I mean 150 each. I haven't even prepped out any of these pieces for Cam. I have no idea what it takes. This was just something that as I was prepping for this video, I decided I was going to do. Okay, so this is nice. It takes the Karatic battle computer. This is the less frequently needed one. It's usually needed in smaller quantities than the prod, so that makes this a little bit easier. But yeah, we are going to do it and add those relic levels. Fortunately though, this is a character that with this specific Datacron set, we only need to go to relic 3, which does help us out a bit so that we don't need to go to higher relics to be able to place a level 9 cron on this character. But it's probably something that I wouldn't be doing if it wasn't for that reduced requirement for this specific Datacron set. Now Ayla here, this is a little bit more of an ask, but I debated it. I think I'm going to do it too. I'm still at a decent spot on the signal data. We've got a good amount of time left still, and it's going to technically help. I'm going to do it. This is the type of character I really am a lot more hesitant towards adding the relics to, because this is the type of character where after the Datacron expires, I'm not going to use her. Oh my god, am I going to talk myself out of this? Let me remind myself what that Datacron does before I add another relic level. Yeah, because it's not a bad Datacron. This is a solid enough Datacron that it's worth having. It's not amazing though. It's kind of a luxury, but I already have it, and I'm not going to re-roll it. Now, the only real reason I'm doing this is partly because the new raids have changed the way that I'm evaluating relics 5 and lore. I'm less hesitant to do them like I was before. If this was a Relic 7 character, no way I would be doing this. But this Datacron set in particular, I'm okay going to Relic 5 to do this. Even if it's for a somewhat middling Datacron, it is something that I'll be able to use with a JML squad in a 5th spot where I otherwise, I'm not going to be using any of the other Datacrons. There's only one other Cron that I'm going to be getting in this set, character-wise in particular, and we already mentioned it a couple times. It's the Jedi Knight Cal Kestis Cron, and this is the kind of thing I do just in case, as just advanced prep. We did this before with Afra and Jabba. Even if I can't use the Datacron for the full period, I might be able to do it for a fraction of the period. For Jabba, it was for a week. For Afra, it was for a month, and they were very beneficial, and there's no real waste or cost to it, because when the Datacron set expires, it just gives you a head start on the next one. So even if we don't get Cal Kestis back in time to use it, I don't have an issue with it because it's going to help me out regardless. We're not going to apply any Omicrons this time, but I do want to talk about some. We did talk generally about some recent Omicrons I had applied in the last video, and I feel like it's at least a topic I would like to touch on, at least when relevant in these videos. And I do want to talk about Malicoses because these are ones that we will apply. We'll talk more about them when I do actually apply them in a couple weeks time. But the way that I'm currently thinking about it, because we are budgeting Omicrons here, is the 2 on the unique. Those are no-brainers. We're going to put those on right away. There's another one here on Die Whelp. This one, that's wait and see to me. When it comes to Zetas or Omicrons on special abilities, I like to wait, because what we can see sometimes is that they're a little conditional, and the conditions may not always be triggered. Like for instance, there are Omicrons and Zetas that say the cooldown will get reset when a character is taken out. I think that's the way that Ben Swallows works. I might be getting it confused with another one. But there's not always a guarantee that you are going to trigger that. And if the trigger does not happen enough, then the Omicron or the Zeta may not be worth applying if it's just a rare occurrence. So I'd like to use them, see what happens first. It might be the case that he uses it a lot, and I think for Die Whelp it is stacking crit damage. It is far more likely that this Omicron will be valuable and the conditions will be triggered often enough. But it's also got a cooldown of 6. It may be a non-issue under Seer Junda. These are the types of things that I want to see actual gameplay before I make a decision on. We did this in the last video. I think this is going to be part of the larger structure of these videos, just touching on the favorited characters. And what you see here is we have a top level of relics of characters I want to take to higher relic. Then we have a range of characters that are gear 12 characters that I would like to relic. These are arguably pretty important relics. And then we have some active farms and marquee characters that I just don't want to forget. And part of the reason, like having Third Sister here and Malicos here favorited, is part of what triggered me to even remember to think about their gear context and how that is going to relate to my GL Leia. But we are missing a pretty important character here, one that is affecting my Chimera counter, and we need to add to this Iden Verso. She needs to be favorited so I don't forget about her. Not someone that we're going to work on right now. There's too many other things going on where we have pulled enough resources away from things that are not related to the Malicoses, to the Calcestises, and the Third Sisters. But we do need to start figuring out the cost of all these characters that I would like to take to relics, because they are very important. These are characters that affect key counters with Karga and Mando in a Fennec Lord Vader counter, or it's Kylo Ren, who I believe is going to be a major component to the Malicos squad, but it's also really important to making the finalizer a functional fleet. And for me right now, it's a cleanup. It's not something that I can rely on, and that is one of the pieces that's going to help the most. Traya, really important character these days, so to take her to relics is just going to make my life easier. Fulcrum, another one of those really nice characters that's going to be part of the Malicos team. I'm going to wait to take maybe Fulcrum and crew up to relics until we have Malicos, but probably not too long after, because I will want to show, like, okay, Gear 12, what does that team look like? I'm sure it's going to be great, but I do want to look at it, and then we'll start taking them to relics. Now, the final part of the last video, we were talking about just characters we would like to take to Gear 12 and start preparing for the raid and strengthening a lot of my pilots, and we're going to continue to do more of that in this video. But we also started doing some scout trooper testing last week, and what I found is we need to address some weaknesses and see if we can improve our testing results for the forthcoming Grand Arena week. And fortunately, doing that in this case also helps us make progress towards the raid. Before we get started with that though, I do want to talk about my overall roster status just a little bit, something I talk about a lot, so I don't want to belabor the points. But for anyone new, because this is going to help make clear why I'm personally making the choices that I am today. Because if your roster is not at this point, what I would recommend is to focus on Gear 11 in general. That's how I built my roster. But if your roster is not already situated with all of this Gear 11, then you're going to be better off getting to a similar point. Because focusing on Gear 11 like I have in general, Gear 11 is pretty usable, gives a lot of depth. It's going to help you in a lot of events like Conquest, Galactic Challenges, Assault Battles, whatever. And it's relatively cheap to accomplish. It's fast. It lets you rapidly develop your roster so that you can use more of it, go deep in Grand Arenas. Because I already have everything at Gear 11, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. And that is choosing from this pool of Gear 11 characters that's already at this staging ground. Like, I've staged them there so that when CG makes changes to the game, I can capitalize on those changes very quickly and just add a little bit more gear to take advantage. And then we are moving them towards Gear 12, but Gear 12 is much more expensive. For every character that you take to Gear 12, you might be able to take 2 characters up to Gear 11. And there are several more pieces at Gear 12 that are very much high in demand, much more costly to acquire. Whereas at Gear 11, there's a lot of pieces that you can just be done with. Like, I'm done with Mark 6 thermals. I'm done with Mark 4 HoloLenses or whatever. There's like a Nubian design text, Nubian scanners. There's a bunch of pieces that a lot of players need to purchase and accumulate that I just don't think about anymore. Instead, there are pieces at this Gear 12 threshold that I do have to constantly strategize around. So I don't want players to follow after what I'm doing and ultimately put themselves into a position where they spend some gear that they might otherwise be better off saving. But for me, to help out Scout Trooper, to do more testing, and to prepare for the raid, we're going to look at these Imperial Remnant characters in particular and bring them up to that Gear 12 staging ground. Death Trooper is a part of that, because in my testing, just was not doing enough damage. I couldn't rely on Death Mark to get triggered, and so I wasn't able to get out from that Scout Trooper testing what I was hoping to get out of it. So we will add this gear level, and hopefully Death Trooper will have a little better opportunities to land Death Mark and allow some action to start happening. Although I've always been hesitant to do this kind of stuff. The reason you've seen these kinds of characters at Gear 11 is because the troopers have been one of those premier Gear 11 squads that are really low cost, high performing, and I've always been reluctant to do that, and I've had to say goodbye, but they already took their first blow with getting Sith Eternal Emperor when I had to take Veers and Stark up higher. Moff Gideon's going to be the next one. Oh, this one costs a Chirotech. We're going to do it anyway because we got time and I've hoarded up a lot of these, but that was not in my mental prep. We're doing it anyway. Now we got a Gear 12 Gideon, and we're going to do the same with Stormtrooper, although this Zeta is something I've thought about a lot. I don't think I'm prepared to do it yet, because I just don't have that many, and it's still, even with all the changes, more of a luxury. That one turn of protection up, it's not quite enough to me, and the sacrifices I just don't think are enough, but this is a small amount. We'll take him up to Gear 12. He's also, I like to bring him up a lot when I do roster reviews. He's one of the cheapest tanks in the game. A lot of players will stop once they see that stun gun. If you power through that stun gun, you can basically take him up to Gear 11 at very little cost. But with those remnant characters, now we have brought up one pilot, got ourselves a little bit more progress towards the raid to put ourselves in a slightly better situation. The last thing I want to do is to start working on some more pilots. I want to be careful with it because it's all about these Mark 6 droid collars and the Mark 4 back to gels. There's also some HoloLenses and some similar pieces, but I would like the command shuttle to be a little bit stronger for the First Order, so I am going to use up some of this piece. I've been working on making sure I have enough where I don't feel guilty about it, but we will throw down that piece onto Phasma. I'm going to do the same for the First Order Stormtrooper because he's the other pilot there. See what's going on with that back to gel. Of these remaining characters, we could do somebody like the First Order TIE Pilot, the Shore Trooper, Kanan, but we've spent enough gear. I think I'm going to be a little bit more careful, and we're just going to hold back, reassess, and then next time we do this, we can work on adding more pilots to Gear 12. Although, Imperial Super Commando and Gar Saxon, what I really need to do there is take off mods. We're not adding more gear level to them. Okay, I think that went a lot faster, a little bit smoother. I had a little bit more of a script this time around because I had a better idea of how I wanted to approach this. I think this is going to get better and better as we move along, and I think it's a pretty interesting conversation point. Maybe we can make, maybe not this type of video, but more topical kinds of conversational videos in the future. But thank you for watching. Be excellent to each other. This is still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.